Yo, 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 Zinger Nation. What is up? Happy Wednesday. My name is Logan Ross, and this is Moon or Bust, your home for all things altcoins and DeFi. I am joined today by a DeFi developer, Brian Moir. How you doing today, Brian?
What's going on, man? Doing good.
I'm doing well. And I also have Liquidation Nation, negative 17 cents in the ByBit, crypto Twitter wannabe influencer, Ryan McNamara. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. How's your Twitter dream going?
You know, every day I'm getting closer and closer to that 1 million follower mark, so it really keeps me going.
I like how you set big goals. You're not going for 1,000 first. You're going straight to 1 million. I'm going to set a smaller goal, something more attainable. I'm going for 1,000 first to begin with.
Moon or bust.
You know what? You make a good point, Brian. You got me there. Okay, so we got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about some news, and then we're going to be covering the blockchain and DeFi industry with an expert, a good friend of Ryan and mine, David Sun, who's been in the industry for longer than almost everyone else, since it was in its infancy. So stay tuned for that. Get excited. If you're excited for today's show, make sure to smash the like button and drop a comment. Let us know the crypto and DeFi projects that you're most excited about right now, and we'll make sure to talk about them if we get time. Also, while you're down there, the first link in the description is the Benzinga Crypto brand new YouTube channel. We're going to be giving away merch every 100 subs up to 1,000, so make sure you subscribe to that if you want a chance to win some of the brand new Moon or Bust merch designed by yours truly. Awesome. So that's that. Make sure to follow us on Twitter as always. And without further ado, let's get into the news. So first up, the Bank of Israel has been testing out the Ethereum blockchain. Ryan, do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. So there's rumors that Israel will be using Ethereum's network, but right now they're just saying that they're using Ethereum's technology. So it's not confirmed as of yet that they're using Ethereum, but they have tested smart contracts and they have tested digital currencies using Ethereum's technology. Most likely they will be using Ethereum for this, but they just completed their pilot program for CBDC, which is the central bank digital currency, on Ethereum's network for tests. And they also tested using digital shekels to send between wallets. Of course, that would work just fine. It's just an ERC20 token. And what's even more interesting, actually, is they tested transferring card titles as an NFT on Ethereum. So this is one of the first use cases that we're seeing of NFTs outside of art, especially for a government to be doing. So that's something I'm personally very excited about. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of new NFT applications coming out in the future, this being just one of them. And they did say that they're looking towards smart contract developers for new ideas on how to implement smart contract technology within their economy. So this is very bullish news for Ethereum and blockchain in general, in my opinion. They've kept it mostly under the radar so far with no official announcements coming out about it. But there is speculation, and it does look like these tests are going well so far. So do you guys have any thoughts on that? I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, the car license is a really cool one. It's an application of DeFi and NFTs that I haven't thought of yet. Obviously, real estate's another big one. They could tokenize their parcels of land, their properties. And if they're working with cars, clearly they're trying to pioneer in the DeFi space. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's a good difference from what happened with China to now we have something positive that might actually have a pretty big social impact to parts of the world. That's pretty exciting. I think that's great news.
Yeah, we got a comment from Happy Mohammed in the chat talking about the China situation. He says crypto is made to be decentralized, so people are still going to be able to use it. I agree completely. The point of crypto is that it can't be shut down or influenced by any central government or entity. So they can try to ban Bitcoin mining, they can ban their institutions, but they can't get rid of a decentralized technology, which is why we love blockchain. Okay, so Israel, that's what's going on. We also have some interesting news. So Alchemy is a fundraising platform, a DeFi platform that is sponsoring a lot of blockchain innovative technologies and funding them. They just hopped on Optimism. They are also working with Polygon and Arbitrum, the scaling solutions for Ethereum. Brian, what do you have for us on this situation?
So Alchemy, it's not really a fundraising platform. They have done a lot of almost like incubators for some of these. It's a blockchain development platform. So if you've ever done any blockchain development, you've probably used something called Truffle or Ganch, and both of those kind of help you. It'll build a blockchain on the Ethereum virtual machine, and you can use it to interact with it and test your product and make sure everything's going good. And what Alchemy does is pretty much that, but on a whole bunch of different levels. It has different testings for a whole wide range of different protocols, different layers, and pretty much anything you could ever need. They have absolutely helped a countless number of blockchain companies. One of the case studies that I was just reading about was Augur. They helped scale their user base, or they helped with the scaling of their user base. So instead of it getting slowed down or bombarded, they were able to use Alchemy and scale up. So they've helped almost any blockchain technology that you can think of that's on Ethereum right now, or sidechain. They've probably in some way, shape, or form have had a part in that. But then they've also funded some of the most, in my opinion, some of the most exciting blockchain projects as well.
Yeah, so Alchemy is the platform that Brian is talking about. And one of the projects that they have funded in the past is 0x. And our guest today, David Sun, had a part in creating the 0x platform. He worked there for a long time, but he's now created his own company called Proof of Beauty. I'm going to bring him onto the stream now. David, how are you doing today? Welcome.
Hey, I'm doing pretty good today. Yeah, I guess crypto prices didn't tank as much as I was fearing, so it's always going to be a good day if I don't have to do crap on DeFi and then save my portfolio.
Yeah, we love to see that. Okay, so David, can you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you get into crypto? How did you get into blockchain and NFTs as well?
Yeah. I joined the crypto space during the 2017 bubble. That was, when ICOs were happening, and also I think the first true NFTs like Crypto Kitties, Crypto Punks, and those were starting to form. So that's when I joined, and then I think I really got hooked on when I joined a club at university. And that's where I just was part of a group of folks that just talked crypto every week. And eventually it was like, I got to join this space. Like, I was very bullish back then. So looked for a place that was willing to hire me. And that was very fortunately for me was the 0x protocol. And so I joined them as an intern and then part-time and then full-time for a brief bit. And I've worked on some of their front-end products like that allows you to exchange NFTs. I've worked on their DEXs products like Matcha. I've worked on more of the behind the scenes. So I've worked on a number of things, but I guess eventually I think my heart is in the NFT space. So wanted to create something myself, and that's where I am now. It's creating a studio called Proof of Beauty that creates NFTs.
So can you tell us a little bit more about Proof of Beauty?
Yeah. So Proof of Beauty, so I think I'm going to describe the studio first and then describe something that we have created. So as a studio, I really think it's really just a way for myself and my co-founder to create cool and interesting NFT projects. That's really all it is. It's like a lab. And one of our first things that we have created is called Hash. You can actually find this project on hash.pob.studio. And it's an NFT project. It's generative art. But the key kind of catch is each NFT is actually correlated to a specific transaction. You can think of it like a coin machine, like those penny crushing coin machines. You can put like a penny into that machine, and you spin that thing, and it'll crush it and give you like a imprint of a piece of art. You can think of Hash from us like that. So you can feed in any specific transaction. It can be the DAO hack. It can be the very first transaction for Ethereum. It could be whatever, and we will produce you a NFT that is strongly correlated to what happened in that transaction. So we have seen the community kind of rally together and start hunting for history. So we found some people were finding, the hacks. Some people were like, this is the contract deployment for V3, stuff like that. So hopefully that explains what that project is, and I can absolutely go more in detail. But
yeah, so you're taking Ethereum transactions or events, historical or otherwise, and you're turning their hashes into art. Using what? Like, how do you take this hash, this jumble of information, and turn it into a piece of art? And do you have maybe I can pull it up here while you're explaining this, but I want to show the audience what exactly they look like.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the hash is in many ways a pointer. It's an identification for a transaction. So with that, we can obviously go on the blockchain and find that specific transaction. And once we have that transaction, we have all that data that is related to that transaction, right? So who sent it, who was on the receiving end, the gas price, contract events that were being emitted, the amount of ETH being transferred, the amount of ERC20s being transferred, and we can take all that information and synthesize it into colors, into compositions, into a lot of just different abstract things. So yeah, so you would want to.
So here's the website here. Where should I go to see one?
Go to hash.pob.studio if you click on that.
Yep. So
that's actually, this is our studio website. So you're going to be heading to our actual POBStudio website. If you see that shuffle button, I guess, right next to the search in the very top right.
Top right, the shuffle button. This one here?
If you click on that and give it a moment, it's going to literally go right now to the latest block and find you a random transaction, create the artwork right there and then show it to you. So that's the artwork. And then you can see 0xAEF, that's the actual transaction hash.
Wow.
And if you scroll down a little bit, you can see how we're taking all this metadata and converting it into visual information. So in many ways, this is almost like the nutritional facts of this NFT. And so, if you actually go to explore, you can actually see some of the more historic transactions, ones that have already been collected and labeled. So that's been something that a lot of folks would do, is collect them and then give them a title and description. If you scroll down a little bit, let's see if you can find a collection that we can show that. Let's do Magic Kingdom.
Magic Kingdom. Okay, yep.
So that's a collection that we curated it for the folks, but all of these are different NFTs related to Beeple's kind of rise, claim to fame, and his rise to I guess the pantheon in NFTs creators. But each one of these transactions are just different parts of his history, and people have added titles and descriptions to them and started to archive them, as like a library would do, right? So, this is, I think, where really people enjoy the Hash project. Is not just it's a cool NFT. It's an NFT with some amount of history correlated with it.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest with you. I like your NFT versions of people's artwork more than his own. So there's lots of different designs. So there's semicircles, there's lines. What determines, is there anything you can give me, what makes something different? Is it like a transaction versus like minting an NFT will result in a different artwork? How does that work?
This is going to go into some nuanced technicalities here, but most of these aren't as sensitive to if this was a mint, if this was not a mint, or whatever. But you can actually see here, this is a Fatalix history collected. And so the circles are actually correlated with the number of leading zeros you have in your transaction hash. So there's actually kind of like a rarity game embedded into the experience. And a lot of people were hunting for 0x000000, right? And I technically believe that if there's 7 leading zeros, there's only one transaction in the entire Ethereum blockchain that has 7 zeros in front of it. And they're like, if this was to happen again, it's like a 1 in a trillion chance, whatever. I don't quite remember the math. But people were hunting because the more zeros, the more circles you'll see. So there's some actual also rarity hunting that people were doing, and people were using Google's BigQuery and doing massive SQL queries just to hunt. And I think that's the fun of hash, I guess.
So you've had 2 series so far. The first one sold out, the Genesis series. The current one is called Saga, and you can either make transactions from your own history, your own Ethereum wallet history, or from anyone else's history, just on the blockchain at large. And as you can see, they're almost sold out. And I've noticed that a lot of these are becoming collectible. They're reselling for more than their value that you charge for them. So if you want to make one of your own transactions, you can do it for 0.03 ETH, or if you want to grab one of Vitalik's transactions, for example, you can do it for 0.32 ETH. Are there any so they're all one of one, right? So the each historical transaction can only be turned into one NFT by your platform, right?
Yeah. And I just to correct, I don't think we're almost selling out yet. We still have a way to go before we sell out. I don't want to give the wrong impression there. But yeah, so it's one of one. If it's minted, it is minted. If you want to acquire that piece of history, you just got to go on OpenSea and buy it from the person who originally or owns it as of now.
Yeah. So what are some of the coolest historical transactions you've seen made? And are there any you think that are missing? Anything that you think could resell that hasn't been made yet?
Yeah. Some of the most, I think, personally interesting ones are always the broader history ones. I think that the first ETH2 transactions, like the staking transactions that are depositing ETH into that contract, I think those just are personally very, very interesting. But not only that, there's so much of a story behind collecting those. And what I mean by that is that, as far as I understand, I'm not 100% accurate on this. The very first transaction that was trying to deposit like 32 ETH actually failed. Like it technically never occurred because something was not done correctly. So the second transaction is actually technically the first deposit, right? So people within the Discord group were trying to figure out, what does it mean to be the first deposit? Like, is the errored one the first, or is the actual an actual 32 ETH being moved, right? So I find the project most interesting is by the principles of all these kind of discussions people are having about archiving history, right? And how do we quantify and qualify things about the blockchain, right? The blockchain does make history rather easy to linearize, but like, how do we critique it? How do we evaluate it? And this has happened as well for the 1 billionth or 1 trillionth transaction. That was going to happen around mid-March, and people were all sitting there waiting for the 1 trillionth transaction. But then, how do we accurately define what's the 1 trillionth transaction? Because we use blocks, right? We synthesize these in separate blocks, and every block is added to the blockchain. It's not like every transaction. Right. So how do we know which one's the 1 trillionth? And there was this massive hunt, and there was 5 or 6 different people. It's like, I have the one, I have it. No, I actually have it, and they're trying to prove to each other. Is this in fact the 1 trillionth transaction? And yeah, so that's what I'm really interested about, is how can I create an NFT that creates more than just, I minted it and I'm going to try to sell it, right? How can I create so much more of a richer experience, right? And that's what Proof of Beauty's hash is all about.
So David, is there any way to actually verify on Proof of Beauty, like if the transaction, like the name of the NFT is legitimate with that transaction? Like, of course you can go on Etherscan and figure it out yourself, but like for users who aren't quite sure how to do that, is there a way, like if I just went on to like my wallet and minted one and then called it like Vitalik's first ETH transaction and tried reselling it, is there any way to combat that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're actually working very hard on something to kind of address it. We call it the Historians DAO. It is a group of community members within the Proof of Beauty's community that we found to be very passionate, and we said, hey, why don't you guys create like a panel, almost like a judge, like the Supreme Court, and you guys go out and verify these titles and descriptions, and you guys can vote amongst each other if it's verified or disputed, and once you give a verdict, we can put that on chain, and show it on OpenSea that the community gave a voice, and obviously the community can be wrong, but assuming that they want to have a good reputation, they'll put the time and due diligence whenever to give a verification. So we're working on a DAO that hopefully addresses this, and we're going to find ways to create an economic model so these historians can be rewarded for their work, right? So I think that's kind of the next step of this project is what can we do more about archiving history, right? Not just minting history, but how do we accurately define what it is?
It's super cool how the community has rallied around this project, and in the resale market has developed as well. Is this something that you you saw coming, or was this kind of a surprise to you?
I think a lot of people would say that I'm much more of a pragmatic personality in the crypto world, and even leaning to a little bit of nihilism in the crypto world. But I wouldn't say this idea is particularly original. From this experience, I've learned that a lot of people have had this idea, right? And I don't credit myself being the guy who created it. But I think the miracle of Hash as a project is, I think it's kind of implementation, its execution. I think that's where really people were drawn to it. And I think there's a lot of things going for it, right? As a concept, right? We really benefited when the Euler Beats NFT community really wanted to collect their own history. So their Discord community raided our Discord community, and everybody was like, "How can we get this curation? How can we get this curation done?" Right? And that kind of organic growth, right? Axie Infinity had a lot of folks that really liked our project, right? So there was a lot of other NFT projects that just wanted to collect their own history and come into this project. So I think there was a lot of things going for it that allowed it to kind of grow. And I like to believe it grew very organically through the intentions of the project, instead of dropping a ERC20 and creating some FOMO.
Very cool. So obviously you chose the Ethereum blockchain for this project to document history. Could you tell us a little bit about why you went with the Ethereum blockchain versus a competitor, and kind of your more general, like, despite the higher gas fees, why did you choose Ethereum?
Short answer is I'm an ETH maxi. I'm very ETH rich and Bitcoin light and whatever altcoin light. But no, it's beyond just like I spent my career in ETH, and I'm very well versed in the Ethereum blockchain and the nuances of developing on it. But the key criteria, if you want to build a project about history, is you need to have history there in the first place, right? Like, if you were to build on a blockchain that is empty, what is there to collect, right? And of all the blockchains we have today, beyond maybe Bitcoin, Ethereum, I think, has the best history, right? There's the DAO hack. There was a hard fork. There were so many DeFi applications. There's NFT projects, right? Like, it just was so rich in history. It's like, it was kind of like, where else can you build a project about history, right? And so I have been chatting with a lot of teams, like Optimism. I've chatted with the Matic guys and Dapper, and among other blockchains. And I think the big we're obviously interested in potentially going onto those chains. But I think one of the big criteria for us is like, there has to be history there. There has to be a rich community that Hash can graft itself on top of. And I think maybe Polygon with the Matic network is getting to a place where there's some vibrancy. But ETH is where it's at still.
Yeah, I agree. As you know, we are ETH maxis as well. So we'd love to see that you are on this. And like, there's no limit. You could go to Polygon. You could add to all these, add your product to all these different chains and still have the Ethereum one. So let's talk a little bit about scaling. We mentioned earlier that Alchemy is now backing Optimism. I know they backed 0x. Can you talk to us a little bit about Alchemy and what this means for a project when they get their backing?
I mean, to clarify, Alchemy is really like the AWS for blockchain, right? I don't run a Ethereum node or a mining software. That's very expensive computationally, but I'll rather rent somebody else's, and that's what Alchemy does for a living.
Gotcha.
Is they allow us to get access to the blockchain, right? And Proof of Beauty's whole infrastructure is using Alchemy right now, and Alchemy is great. They are great at providing infrastructure, and so obviously for an infrastructure company, they have to be hyper aware of where people need infrastructure, right? And so with that, I believe they have supported which chain already. They have already supported one chain, and now they're supporting Optimism, which is personally I'm a big fan of. I personally like Optimism a little bit more amongst other L2 solutions. Okay. But yeah, that just means that we now have the infrastructure. I don't have to go and figure out how to connect to that blockchain, right? And then so that's a really big deal for us as developers. So I think for this, it's a huge signal for a blockchain or for a technology to get the backing of one of the infrastructure providers, and Alchemy being one of the more reputable and dominant ones in our space. So hearing the news is very good for me. Like more than reason to see a future where Proof of Beauty's hash to be on Optimism, right? If the infrastructure we use can support it.
So to go on a more of a technical level of POB, did you utilize like the OpenSea SDK, or do you use IPFS for storage or anything, or do you have any solution for the storage besides OpenSea, or do you guys just do that?
That's a great question. When it comes to storage wise, we pursue a route similar to Art Blocks, another generative art NFT project, as in we store the generative algorithm on chain, and then we store the the parameters that would fit into that algorithm also on chain. And so technicality is you can always recreate that artwork at any resolution and that you want. If you want to print it, we can get it out there. If you want it just for like a small, postcard, we can do that as well, right? So we do actually internally have our own like data apparatus to make this process faster to serve, and that's kind of all in-house. In-house as in it's it's not open SDK. And we do use IPFS for quite a lot of things to store objects or massive data that would be cost prohibitive to store on the Ethereum blockchain. So the answer is like yes, but no, and yes. That's the best answer. It's always recreatable, and we provide open source tools to recreate it. But we're obviously looking at ways to create more and more redundancies, such that, because obviously recreating it should be the last solution to this problem of permanence. So we're creating IPFS backups, we're doing a lot of other backup forms that hopefully will create enough redundancies where that's not going to happen.
Gotcha.
Very cool. So how big is the Proof of Beauty team right now?
It's one and a half, I guess. One my co-founder is part-time, soon to be full-time, so 1.5. And yeah.
Awesome. So could you tell us a little bit about what it's like working in the blockchain and crypto industry, since you have such a good insider information? Yeah.
Well, so I guess most of my tenure has been doing a more crypto bearish market since 2017 to now. And I like to say that during this time, it's been generally pretty good, right? It's been quiet. It was more about building and about stress testing what we're building. And so with that, I think there was a ton of lessons, I think, we came out of the bear market with. And I'm hesitant to say, but also aware that during a bull market, we sometimes forget the lessons we learned during the bear market. And that's something that, for me, I've had a hard time. I'm a little bit bummed out that such is the case. But whenever there's a bull market, there's always an extremely healthy dose of optimism. And more importantly, willingness to believe something is easier than it is. and during the bear market, we really realized it usually isn't. And I think that the case before was DeFi in general. 2017 DeFi was practically non-existent as a technology, as a concept, right? I think at the time there was MakerDAO, there was 0x was upstarted, but we all wanted to. We had the idea of creating a DEX, right? And that sounded easy, right? Was just find a way to create, as described in the 0x white paper, a way to trade between two people and create a settlement system. We soon did not realize that there was so much more nuance to this problem, right? There's how do we get liquidity? How do we get a good price movement? How do we protect front running? How do we aggregate all this liquidity in different places together so you can always get the best price, right? So the problem became what people thought was a 3-page white paper, and people YOLO'd into an coin, and it soon became, something that hundreds and hundreds of people spent their livelihood trying to solve. And I was one of the few that I guess had to put a stab into this problem. And I think that's some of the more where I got more of my pragmatism and nihilism in the space. Without stuff like Uniswap to come out, without stuff like that we would not see where DEXs is today. And I think that's the biggest thing coming in now that this bull market is reaching wherever it's reaching. Or a lot of the things that we're hyping up right now, and I think L2 being one of them, we're going to realize there's a lot harder of a problem to solve than just making announcements and the such. So I look forward to it. That's why I'm in this space. And obviously, there's hopefully the next bull cycle we can go higher because of the hard work we do during the bear markets.
So David, moving away from Proof of Beauty and 0x, what other DeFi projects make you excited about the space right now?
I'm a big fan of aggregating technologies, not just aggregating products. There is so many DeFi applications and protocols, right? That's kind of the beauty of DeFi. But it's very hard to reconcile all these things, and so things like Zerion, I'm a really, really big fan of, right? Creating a front-end interface, allowing me to see my compound positions, my positions in random stablecoin projects, buying set tokens, right? All these kind of stuff. It's nice to have them in one place, and I think there's a lot of work to be done on the UX side when it comes to these protocols, and I'm very excited to kind of get that to a place where it's much more approachable for my parents, right? Like my parents now use Zerion for their light crypto portfolio, and I think that it would have been much harder if they had to go on 10 different websites to manage a DeFi experience. And because DeFi is so public, it's very easy for Zerion to add a new protocol once that happens, right? I love that about DeFi compared to the traditional finance world, where like if you want to integrate with the Chase API, that is so much regulatory and legal and technical work just to do that. Where Zerion in a weekend could get a new lending protocol that's competing against OV and Compound on board, right? And I think that just that sheer velocity of innovation you can do on the UX side is going to be incredibly empowering for future protocols, for where maybe protocols don't really need a front end team, right? Or don't need a strong one. They can outsource that to incentivized teams that want to create the best UX, right? And I think that's going to be a great trend for the industry.
Awesome. So let's turn to the chat real quick. I know Brian, you got the next question. But so Chris asks, do you think the e-gaming is still a play? As they said, I've seen sold out arenas just to watch. So what do you think about e-gaming, the NFT space, the intersection between that?
You mean, so I guess you're talking about like just gaming in general,
blockchain gaming, yeah,
or competitive, like esports. Yeah, I could definitely speak about that. I know that 0x a few years ago was very, very bullish on Gods Unchained, a Hearthstone competitor. I know that 0x internally is still, and before was very into NFTs, because we were one of the few protocols that can trade NFTs way back. And for my impression of these, my biggest thing is just no matter what blockchain technology you use, you just have to create a good game first. It's as simple as it gets. There's so many different studios creating things with blockchain, and eventually it's either the Ethereum blockchain is too gas inefficient, so they have to move off, or side table their whole NFT verse. So it's very hard to get two focuses to work in the studio, right? Create a good game, create a good NFT experience that can support this game, and I'm happy to say that there's people figuring out a very fine sliver of gaming experiences that will succeed in a crypto world. And I think the name is completely escaping me. The Polygon, all those like horse races NFTs. I think the game is simple. The game is, you don't have to explain the game. The game is historically very relevant. But then throwing NFTs on it, I think actually made that game like super, super cool. And there was a reason for it to be in NFTs in this case almost. And I think those things are succeeding very well. And I'm not surprised if just recreating things will be the best way, and finding the most capital and human resource efficient way to do that, I think will more than likely lend to a very successful NFT project. So yeah, I am not bullish yet. I do know that I'm like willing to put money or put ETH and bet that Ubisoft and Disney, they're all figuring out something, maybe with Dapper. How do you build your own media chain to tokenize their own content? And 100% willing to believe that a game would exist in that context. It's
totally. Yeah.
Well, just going back to kind of your overall experience with DeFi and now your pretty successful experience with NFTs, if you could like kind of start it over, or if you were in charge of the whole space, what are some things that you would improve or change about DeFi and then about the NFT space? And you can even combine the two, just maybe just different protocols besides the token ones. What would you do with that?
My biggest critique, and this is a critique I think still holds fairly true in our current context, is DAOs. I think DAOs are overrated, at least the current form of them. Making something a DAO doesn't solve human coordination issues. Right? Coordinating humans is still fundamentally rooted in humans as a problem. And I think that during the growing pains of the DeFi world, I think a lot of organizations struggled with how can I reconcile a DAO into my project? Because usually a DAO implies there was a token, right? And I think that we see, at least my experience with some of these governance experiences, the likes of Uniswap and whatever, they all kind of still struggle with this, very human issue of politics of varying interests. And I kind of came out of this experience learning that the best governance is no governance. And what I mean by that is I love Uniswap V1's elegance in the context that it's so simple, it doesn't need to be governed. And I think there's a lot of other things that we need to revisit what governance really means. I don't think they don't need governance. It's more, how do you more correctly align parties? And maybe more so is, how can we do things without governance until we finally actually need it? Because I feel like we all got so crazy on governance and we were all figuring out how to do it the best way, but then didn't really focus, I think, enough resources into just growing the DeFi pie or the NFT pie. And well, we live in a world right now where I think I have seen the word DAO used like every 2 tweets on my Twitter feed. People are creating DAOs, and I like that these DAOs are more playful in nature. They're not like governing the Uniswap whatever protocol. They're hey, how do we collect NFTs, or how do we curate shit? Right? Like stuff like that. this more lighthearted, playful context allows us to experiment, right? Allows us to push. How can we enable a DAO to do things that we couldn't do as humans, right? And then we can figure out a little bit more nuance, right? But yeah, I feel like I'm still at a place where we have more work to do on a DAO, and then I think that we kind of took a weird. I think it would have been a shorter path for DeFi if some projects kind of didn't put so much time into DAOs, but we learned the lesson eventually, right? We learned why, because you can look Uniswap V1, V2, and finally a Uni token, right? And then so many other protocols are doing the same now, and I think that's a great. It's good that we're learning the lesson, I think.
Definitely. Okay, so everyone out there, if you're just tuning in, we've got twice as many viewers as we did at the start. So this is Moon or Bust, the show for all things altcoins and DeFi. Right now we're talking to David Sun, former developer at the 0x protocol and currently running Proof of Beauty, POB.Studio. You can check it out. It's in the description below. We're talking the general DeFi space right now. For those who don't know, that's decentralized finance. That's the new world of finance on the blockchain. And we're talking about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. So anyone who's not quite there, anyone who didn't follow what you might have just said, David, could you explain from a high level what a DAO is and what you think, since you said there's too many of them, you like how they're becoming more playful now. Where do you see DAOs in the future?
Yeah, I mean, DAOs, TLDR is like you create a group chat with a lot of smart people.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find a way to create a Venmo for them and a shared bank account. We just call the shared bank account a smart contract on the Ethereum blockchain, right? But that's really all it is. And that's why I think there's a lot of hype around it, is we literally just rebranded a group chat with a shared Chase bank account. But then again, the problem is it's a shared, it's like if you have done any group projects, either with coworkers or at school, there's always issues with coordination, right? And so that's why I think there's like DAOs have are a little bit overhyped, but I do think how it can enable people that previously couldn't work together now can work together because of DAOs. I think that's a very powerful attribute of the DAO being on the blockchain, right? It's if you have ETH. If you have a reputation on crypto Twitter, you can join, right? You don't have to ask a government for a visa or whatever. You don't have to get these contracts things or whatever obligations or whatever. It just allows the flow of value, not just, token value, but intellectual value to really go through. And that's, I think, the big overarching vision of a blockchain is how do we get value to move more freely. And I think that DAOs hopefully will empower just better political exploration, right? We live in a world where if you want to innovate in politics, usually that means working in a form of a political structure. So that's either in governance and in the U.S. government or whatever, or whatever other foreign government. But now that we have a space like in the form of a DAO to allow us to experiment with politics in a much more non-violent way, as we're not going to go out and drive tanks to somebody else's border because of a DAO, hopefully. I actually, now that I say it out loud, that yeah. But yeah, it's like I think that just having this playground is so powerful, right? And that's the value I think DAOs bring, right? Is we can spin stuff like this up, and I can work with somebody in Africa and other regions of the world, right? And work on something that we can set aside maybe cultural or political differences just to work on something, because a DAO can be very specialized or it can be very broad, right? Who's there to stop or care about it, right? And yeah, that's very cool, right? And I think that's the same reason why DeFi was so cool, right? But this now is trading intellectual value instead of tokenized value, right? And yeah.
Yeah. So if last summer was the DeFi summer, this summer might be called by some the summer of scaling. Can we talk about scaling Ethereum? What parts of it excite you? What parts of it maybe scare you? And what implications you think a scaled Ethereum will have on the DeFi market in general?
Yeah. Scaling in general, right? It's during my brief tenure on the Matcha Dex team, gas prices was a huge issue, right? Like even myself at the time, I didn't use Matcha too much because it's like I can't trade into assets unless I'm trading minimum 10,000 because the gas fees is $200, right? Like if that's the case, you're just gonna limit a lot of folks, right? Like when my parents wanted to use DeFi, it's like I don't want to spend $30 of gas fees because I bought my ETH at the price that it is today. Whereas where I bought it, years back, that $30 really means like 50 cents, right? Like I'm willing to pay that because the ETH was cheaper for me. And so there's obviously this creates a problem of what do you call it? Like there's some amount of like
they're priced out.
You're right, like priced out. And I hope that scaling kind of really helps us serve this image of like a global DeFi world where anybody can use it. But currently, economic reasons, there's classism that's involved. But hopefully we can solve this, right? And so that's why we're spending so much time on scaling solutions, right? And this has been doing for a while, but now that we actually have an impetus, it's actually happening. But I think scaling is really going to bring up to all of us is how silent is D in the word DeFi, right? How much do we need it to be decentralized? Because if you look at technologies like BSC, Smart Chain from Binance, even Polygon to some extent, a lot of other things, they're just not nearly as decentralized as Ethereum blockchain or Bitcoin due to the nature of their work. And so we have to really ask the question is, does that matter? Or does it matter as much to the broader audience? And I think that's something that we came to this question with Ethereum as we should just be decentralized, period. And there was no debate, pretty much. And now that this is becoming more nuanced, I think it allows us to explore how much we have to care. And hopefully that allows us to kind of be more relaxed with some application, because some applications simply don't need the scale of anti-censorship that the Ethereum blockchain can enable. But also the problem is with this is as we're growing during a bull market, I do believe this will negatively affect some people because these things can be growing in a way that won't hurt you or be adversive to that community. That's just the natural growing pains of these technologies. But personally, the reason why I like Optimism the most is because Optimism is very strongly tied to the Ethereum blockchain, as in it uses this whole optimistic rollup stuff, which I frankly don't have an understanding of, but like it has to come back to the blockchain to reinforce its security, whereas other blockchains are not that strongly tied, or other scaling solutions. And I think that always will present a problem of who actually holds your mining or your miners in the nodes, right? And most of these, there's a huge majority held by single entities that have an interest in propping up a token pricing or whatnot, right? Or are geopolitically located in a place that can be adversive to a certain political entity or whatever. And that's always going to be a little bit of a problem. But, I'm fairly bullish on ETH 2.0. I do think that that's going to really be cool, but it has a lot of development delays because ETH people are fairly idealists and they want everything to be done right. Where scaling solutions are like, we need to get something out in the first place. So I as a token holder for ETH, it is a little scary to have to go through a fundamental change of your consensus model to have to re-coordinate a new party of holders, of incentive holders, right? You're not talking to miners anymore, you're talking to ETH holders. And that's always going to be great. It's just a new game that you have to play. What is there new ways to hack the system? What are new ways for adversive groups of people to work against the system? And that's always going to create instability. And that's why I think a lot of people like Bitcoin, right? It doesn't freaking change. ETH has a potential to change, right? EIP 1559 with a hard fork will radically change how gas fees work, right? That doesn't happen on Bitcoin, right? But it does happen here. What if it changes in a way that we don't like and we have nothing to say about it, right? And that's a little bit scary. So Yeah, I do think ETH. I mean, ETH 2.0 does have its own scaling limitations, as in there's some things that are a little harder to do in 2.0 than it is today, and vice versa. But well, I'm excited for that new world. But I wouldn't be surprised we won't need 2.0 as much as we thought we need it, simply because Optimism, Polygon, and all these things will be so much more mature. And I am a little bit afraid of creating so much throughput and then realizing we live in a world where even governments are trying to shut down some institutions will try to shut down our use of the blockchain, either through stopping infrastructure like Alchemy from being accessible, right? Stopping these things, and we may live in a world where we may have large institutions try to fight against this huge movement, right? And that could create a scary deprivation of demand for throughput, and who knows where that would be, right? As we enter a very politically unstable future because of COVID, right? So. Yeah.
I think you really nailed it on how much does decentralization matter. That's the question that everyone is asking themselves right now. I think that you could have some more centralized applications like Polygon still existing on the Ethereum chain, and then the more important ones could use something like Optimism that really take that censorship or the anti-censorship from Ethereum to the max, to the fullest extent. So I have a question from the chat. Kieran Fitzsimmons asks, do you think that Ethereum scaling will kill competing layer ones like the Binance Smart Chain and Solana?
Probably not. I do believe we'll live in a world of a power law, as in there will be a number one smart chain, smart contract chain, and there will be a number two, and then it just drops off precipitously.
Yep.
I think that's just the natural reality of how economics of aggregation works, right? Like there's Coca-Cola, there's Pepsi, there's usually things comes in twos, just out of the natural reality of how things merge, how things break up. And we'll probably see that in Ethereum, in the crypto world, right? And I think Ethereum is going to be here to stay, probably as number one or number two. And whoever it is, number one or who's complementary to ETH will probably be some non-EVM chain, like Solidity based chain, simply because it's just different and can do something that an EVM based chain, virtual machine chain can't do. And that could be Solana. I am very bullish on Solana. I know a lot of great folks building things on Solana. They also have a huge war chest of money to invest into the developer communities and build their things. And they have a lot of great DeFi stuff already happening there. There's already great NFT stuff. They have a pretty good early track record. I think that's what's going to be. But I think Ethereum is obviously probably going to be here to stay because everybody else is using the EVM, right? They're using the same base system to build their own system, right? So indirectly, they're all going to come back together, right? So I kind of aggregate those all into one bucket.
So I have two flippening based questions for you. One, do you think ETH has a chance to flip BTC within the next 12 months? And two, if there was a chain to flip Ethereum, would it be Solana or something else?
Next 12 months for Bitcoin, probably not. I think it really depends on EIP 1559 and if Ethereum becomes a deflationary currency. But Bitcoin just has the meme. It's just the big meme. Like you go to Miami blockchain and it's such a strong meme. It's Bitcoin, right? Like everybody and their mother knows about Bitcoin, and ETH less so. At least in 2017, like ETH was known, but like just was not even talked about really. But now it's like the tables are getting more and more even, right? But Bitcoin, I do believe the flip will happen, mainly because Bitcoin has one bad thing going for it. It's very, very arrogant of a community and technology, right? It believes it's right, and it's unwilling to, or more unwilling than other communities to take new ideas, right? And the fact that Bitcoin is rising in its pricing just creates a psychological effect that you're already priced out, right? And it's designed with its supply mechanics. Like once once that like mining fee gets to a place where it's very small, like where do we live in that world? Is it secure enough? And it's very slow. And more importantly to me is I do believe that proof of work will eventually become a vulnerability for your blockchain, because you can see with the Cetron like issue with China cracking down on mining, right? If we can make running the blockchain easier and easier and cheaper, that will make your blockchain more robust, right? That's just the case. But for Bitcoin, you need to have farms. It's like I can look at where the electricity is running as a cop, right, and find where you're running Bitcoin, right? And I think as we enter a world that's politically very unstable, more and more governments probably will be adversive to a currency that can manipulate, that is working against their own sovereign currency. It's very easy to shut down Bitcoin operations, right? But in a proof of stake case, it's a little less so, right? If I can run it on a Raspberry Pi for $30, right, that's defensible, right? And I think Bitcoin's unwillingness to move, and then you can see the relative failure of the Lightning Network. It's hard to say where it would go, and also I've always leaned myself personally more into the Bitcoin Cash philosophy, where it's used as a cash instead of as digital gold. I've always leaned a little bit more to that side, but yeah. So for ETH to be flipped, it's probably gonna, if it's going to be flipped, it's probably going to be Solana. I just out of the fact that they have money and they have talent. Usually that's a success formula. Assuming they don't get cocky. It's a success formula, right? I've known some of the best folks, like best coworkers, ex-coworkers join the Solana train. So just on that principle.
So someone in the chat wants to know about Cardano. Do you have any thoughts on Cardano?
Honestly, I don't really follow them.
Okay.
Not much beyond just, I know they're on testnet with smart contracts or whatever right now. They've been here for a while. If you at this point haven't really made a stab at Ethereum, you're like more than likely not going to succeed. That's my feeling. Just out of the principle of aggregation theory, it's just things usually become 1 and 2 and then drops off. You have to be at like Solana fighting levels if you want to, I think, have a stake in the far future. Because once the bear market kicks and we lose like 90% of the attention we have today, getting attention is going to be very hard. And how are you going to get money? How are you going to get developers? How are you going to get teams? Right. That's what we're all doing in the bull market, right? Is collecting as much attention as we can to hold on to it during a bear season. So.
Well, we are running out of time, but this was incredible. I had so much fun today. I learned a lot. If you learned something, make sure to smash the like button. Let us know that you want us to have David on again, and we will make that happen for you. I know I still have some questions that we couldn't get to, so you'll have to come back if you're willing. But yeah, that's all we have time for today. Ryan or Brian, do you have any last questions or comments for David?
That was really interesting the whole thing that you just did. It was a whole lot to take in, but that's like my thoughts on it exactly. I think that Bitcoin is kind of not necessarily the word outdated, but how you describe it is perfectly how I feel about it. It's just there's better ways, and there's a more future with these different projects out there and these different whole ecosystems.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks for coming on, David. It was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was great.
Yeah, so with that, David, I'll turn the floor over to you. Where can the audience go to check you out?
Yeah, I guess on the metaverse. I have a personal Twitter, Dave4506. Don't tweet that much there. But just follow everything from Proof of Beauty. That's my life right now. So POB.Studio, all our links, our Discords, our Twitter, it's on there. Give us a follow. We have other interesting projects we're building that hopefully are as cool as what we already built. So stay tuned for those. And yeah, so go on our site, find all of our links there, and always happy to answer questions and stuff in our Discord.
Awesome. Well, the link to the website is in the description below if you want to go check it out. But yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Once again, this is Moon or Bust, your show for all things altcoins and DeFi. My name is Logan Ross, and we will see you on Friday, right? Yeah, Friday.
Maybe we'll
peace.
get to a mood or bust.
Yeah, hopefully someday.
Yeah.